Welcome to Hello Kind Soul Podcast, where we raise the vibration of kindness on a global scale. I'm Dr. Ebony Green, your host, and I'm super excited to be with you today. If you want to follow us on all major platforms, look us up at Hello Kind Soul Podcast. And if you want to follow me, look me up at eGreen Equity. I hope you enjoy the episode. Have a great day. Welcome to Hello Kind Soul Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ebony Green, and I am so excited to be in community with Kevin Howard. Thank you for joining us today, Kevin.
Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Green. I know you've invited me to call you Ebony, so Ebony, but I just wanted to put that title in there, at least up front. So excited to be talking to you today.
Yes, I appreciate that. So I just want to give you a brief moment to, give us the 20-second cliff notes on you, and share any links that you would want folks to access to find you or to purchase any materials that you've produced.
Sure. Okay. My name is Kevin Howard, and I have been a career business banker for most of my professional life, about 25 plus years. Progressively, I transitioned that career as a business banker into climate risk management and sustainability. I was a part of the first team to bring climate risk as an actual level one risk to a large major financial institution when I was at US Bank, the fifth largest bank in the country. After doing that work, I since launched my own climate risk management consulting business called Climate Changes Everything here in the state of Oregon. I am a published author. I write social commentary on personal growth, spirituality, our social evolution, and, so many other factors. My book is Onward at Last, and which was originally published by Atmosphere Press in 2022, December 2022. But I did a new edition inspired by last year's presidential election. So it's Onward at Last, the 2024 presidential election edition, where I wrote an extra chapter and an extra 21 commentaries to flesh out some of the narratives that we are confronted with that actually influence how we see ourselves, how we see each other, and how we understand the world. Because I think that this is at the heart of so many problems we face. But if you are interested in my work and certainly my book, you can go to www.onwardatlast.com, and where you will find all the links in order to purchase the book, which is available in hardcover, soft, paperback, ebook, and audiobook narrated by Carol and Jania. But if you can't afford to buy the book, you can also access the commentaries for free on the blog page on the website, which is easily available on the website. But that's me in a nutshell, and excited about our conversation.
Awesome. One of the things that came up when you and I chatted prior to today was you had presented this amazing thought around really us remembering. And one of the examples you used was specifically around when you cook a meal and you lay the table and you put the food, you had said to me, how many people contributed to making that meal? And then you talked about that. So I would love you to start there with sharing that analogy again for our audience, in connection to this notion of remembering our humanity.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up and asking that question, Ebony. It is. We live at a time where trust has broken down in our social discourse, in our national conversation, to the point where people don't trust experts, they don't trust politicians, they don't trust business leaders, they don't trust people from different areas of the country. So we need, in order to communicate successfully, we need a basis by which to bridge that trust. And the method that I use in my book and in my commentaries is I use our shared experiences, something that we all do and we all can relate to, because it is in these shared experiences that if I can make the case for why our society is going in the wrong direction and how we already know how to fix it, and you don't have to trust me, then, and you can just look to your own shared experiences, like cooking a meal. And so I point out that the virtues, values, and narratives that define us as Americans, which have convinced us that we're separate individuals, that the way we are successful is that we compete against each other, right? That it's appropriate for us to advance our own interest, right? That all those kind of virtues that define us as Americans. Well, I point out how those are self-defeating. And the
Mm.
reason why those are self-defeating is, well, we know it based on how we share a meal with our families and friends, right? When we share a meal with our families and friends, you prepare a meal, you know how many people are going to be there sitting around the table. Okay. For everyone you invite around the table, no one is asking who owns the food, right? The food is here, the food is on the platters. Everyone passes the platters. Everyone takes what they're going to eat, right? And they pass the platters on. And so even if you finish the first round on your plate, you go pick up the platter again and you get some more. Everyone eats. Everyone leaves the table. There's usually leftovers to be put away for later. Okay. In this context, we shared. No one took more than they needed. No one took more to save for later. No one took half of everything and leaving people at the table without eating. The problem is we know how to function in society when it's within the context of people we care about, right?
Mm.
But then we step outside, and what do? Everyone tries to claim as much as they can. Is there any wonder half the world doesn't have enough? Right? I mean, we are competing against each other, even the hands that feed us, right? What did we
That
learn in
part.
COVID? At heart, right? We learned in COVID, the essential workers in COVID, while most of us were sheltering in place, the essential workers who had to go to work, who had to go out there to make sure the electricity was running to your house, who was providing security, who was providing healthcare, essential services, they're some of the lowest paid people in our society. So here we are benefiting from what they do, and yet they are suffering. They're losing the competition for the goods and services that all of us need to take care of ourselves and our family. That's the toxic society out here. And the difference between the two is we know if we share, there will be plenty for all of us, and all of us will be taken care of, and all of us will be satisfied. But we forget about that once we go outside in the broader society. And this is what we need to get back to. So that's the point of that analogy, is to use something that we all do. I don't care your education level. I don't care what part of the country you live in. All of us share dinner, share a home cooked meal with family and friends. We know how to treat each other. We know how to make sure everyone leaves the table fed, right? We need to get back to that if we want to have a good society.
So it's so interesting you say that because part of the piece that really comes to the top is how did we go from a place of understanding that there's enough for us all, right? That we're not in competition, which is absolutely sold to so many people, right? Like I always say to people, comparison is the thief of joy. And it only happens because we don't believe that I can be worthy and can be worthy doing similar or very different things. So, how do you get people to a place to start to remember that as a virtue or a value? That we are interdependent to some extent. There is enough for all of us, and real success comes when we understand the importance of collaboration or cooperation in achieving the outcome.
Great question, Ebony. And here's the thing. It first starts with, and this is really foundational. Now, we have how we see the world is through the lens of our perception, right? Now, reality is actually going on. But whatever the filter of our perception is, colors the reality that we see, right? Okay. And so ideally, what I've discovered in my journey is you want a clear lens. You want to actually see reality as it is so that you can then make choices with that reality. But the problem is our virtues and our values and the narratives, the stories that we tell ourselves culturally, actually they color the filter of our perception. And the thing about it is that we use this perception to understand who we are. We use this perception to understand each other. We use this perception to understand the world around us. The problem is that we have been told a series of foundational virtues and values that are reinforced by persistent narratives,
Mm.
right? Which are not true, which are not consistent with how we survive every day, how we actually live every day, right? And so the reason why people forget who they are, the reason why they forget how they survive is because they are convinced that they are separate, individual, self-interested people. Every rationalization is given to say this is what human nature is, as if this is the only way humans live. It's not true. It's ahistorically not true, right? Right. But this is what we've been convinced of. This is what we've been propagandized into believing, right? And so what we actually exercise our choices based on these beliefs, based on this the filter of our perception. Now the problem is if you actually live in one way, but your belief system tells you that the reality is something different, there's a condition for that. It's called cognitive dissonance,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of people suffer from cognitive dissonance because they know that they don't produce the air they breathe. They know that they don't produce the water they drink, or the food they eat, or the clothes they wear, or the car they drive, or the house they sleep in, on and on and on. But the narrative they've been convinced of is that the reason why they're successful is because of the choices they make. Right? The reason why, it's an expression of their freedom that it makes sense to them based on these beliefs that anything I do to advance my own interests is a good thing, even if to do that hurts the people who I rely on every day. Right. And this is actually what's going on. And so this is the cognitive dissonance. This is the when you know in your heart of heart something is wrong, but your belief system obscures that and
Hmm.
rationalizes that away. So you continue to make these choices for reasons that your heart of heart knows is not true. This is why you can't find fulfillment. This is why you can't find purpose, is because you're doing things that you're living in a way that's inconsistent because your beliefs are wrong. Right. And so the way to remember is to recognize that we've been lied to
Mm.
recognize that nothing in nature lives independently. Independence is the heart of the American experience, and nothing, including Elon Musk, lives independently. Elon Musk just has the money to buy what everyone else produces. And if someone didn't do it right, he gets the lemon just like we do. So what I'm saying is none of us are independent, right?
So,
That doesn't mean we don't have sovereignty. We don't make choices. Yes, we have agency. That's the truth about our what makes us individual is that we have the power to make choices. But how we actually function every day, all you have to do is just ask yourself, who produced the things I need today in order to survive? Who produced the food that I eat? Who produced I mean, you'll see it's thousands and thousands of people or forces of nature that are way beyond your control, right? It's okay. This is how we actually live.
now
And
what
so if you
happens?
I'm sorry.
Real quick, what happens? So I totally agree with you, right? So it's like you've been lied to. It's simple, but absolutely can call dissonance with people to realize, like, wait, what do you mean? So you mentioned something a little bit earlier about shared experiences. Like that's the path. So
Yeah.
if I'm sure we both agree, when you let people know the idea that everything you do, you've earned on your own is a lie, that there's an interdependent nature in us being or being well, how do you use shared experience? Or I wonder how you would advise us to use shared experience as the common through line to minimize the amount of dissonance when you're helping people realize it's a lie.
this is how we disengage from the relentless false narratives, from the relentless false virtues and values, is that we do have these experiences, these basic experiences, how we eat, how we drink, how we breathe, the environments in which we live, right? And so by without having to trust anyone, to actually look at the steep wisdom of your actual lived experience. Is it true that we live independently? What is independent? We understand what that word means, right? Okay, when you look at your own lived experiences, is that true? And once you start realizing that these things that have been given to you by your own culture, right, are not giving you an honest and a truthful and an aligning perspective on what is reality, right? That this is not, it's not a virtue to, independence is to be in deep space without air, sunlight, all types of atmospheric pressure. Okay, we cannot live that way, right? Okay. So if your actual the steep wisdom of your lived experience, which you do not need a degree, you do not need a certain level of education, you do not need a certain level of literacy. Every human being understands how they have actually lived, like
Mm.
with basics, right? Okay. If the wisdom of that experience tells you that these certain things are true, that we live symbiotically, we live interdependently, right? And we're designed necessarily to do that, right? That's just who we are, right? Then all of a sudden, other people become important, right? The mythology that we're separate and what happens to Ebony doesn't affect Kevin, right? Which means that I can go and roll over even though something horrible has happened in Ebony. This is what is happening in our broader society right now
Yeah,
because we're
for sure.
competing against each other. We've been told rationalizations to say, oops, I guess you lost. All the spoils go to the winners. But is that really how we live? No, it's not how we live. If and so therefore, this is why the shared experience is so powerful, is because it decodes the mythologies that we've been told, and it gives us a basis that we can look to our own experiences that relate to each of us, right? And show how common we are, what unites us, what brings our humanity to the fore, right? And then this is the basis by which we can organize ourselves. So what kind of society do you want to have? One that all the things that support your well-being are supported, so that your well-being could be as good as possible, right? I mean, we can still look at it from a selfish perspective, but if you survive every day based on the actions of thousands of other people, those thousands of other people matter. If
Mm.
you survive every day because of the atmospheric pressure of the planet, right? It matters if you are doing something to affect the atmospheric pressure of the planet, right? Or you're doing something to affect the availability of fresh water, or you're doing something to affect the availability of seafood, right? I mean, those things matter if that's how you're surviving. And this is the problem with these narratives, these virtues, and these values, is they make us sound like as if we're separate from these things, and that all those things are there to serve us. So that's what allows us to destroy them, which is what we're doing with the climate crisis and resource overshoot and all these other problems we're creating, because we're all operating on this myth that I can advance my self-interest and take care of me, and that won't have any huge negative effect on how I survive, when actually that's not true. And so how the road to that understanding comes from the steep wisdom of our lived experience.
So how do you get people to care, Kevin? I mean, I want to believe, like, I think you and I care, but I think fundamentally, if you've been enculturated to believe that it doesn't matter how your neighbor is if you don't know him or her, what is it we do? Like, what do you, what's your advice? Like, how do we get people to tap in and really understand what you're saying, these concepts, and move to a place of action to care enough to value the people that are behind all the things that we do, we consume, we enjoy, etc.
Best news is that people already know something is wrong. I
Mm.
think I think I think that the to the mistake that the powers that be have made is that they have driven the wellness of society to the point where most people are not doing well.
Mm.
And within lived memory, most people were doing much better. So people have a comparison, right? So, within the last 30, 40 years, right, the working class of the United States, for example, the working class of the entire global North, right, was doing much better. And then we adopted something called globalization, right? And where we allowed our major companies to bottom feed labor to the cheapest markets around the world. And what that did was is it took the better jobs in the domestic economies that working class and middle class people were working in the 80s and the 90s, and it sent them to cheaper markets, leaving those people with less capacity to earn. And so that's what's made life so much harder, is that working class and middle class people trying to just go about their lives totally bought into these false narratives, right? But finding that they can't buy a home, finding that they can't send their kids to school, finding that they can't take a vacation. And so most people already know there's a problem. But most people don't have the time because they're working multiple jobs, they're doing multiple things just to try to keep both nostrils over the waterline, right? So the good news is that because they already know there is a problem, if there's something that they don't have to learn, if there's something that they could tap into their actual lived experience that will help them remember, oh, okay, I'm participating in a system that's creating the struggle that I'm struggling with, and that I'm empowered to do something else. And in fact, the answer is at my dinner table. The answer is, yeah, we need to get back towards a sharing economy. We only have one planet. This is a planet of finite resources, right? There's so many people on the planet, and there's plenty of resources for everyone. I mean, let me just give you one example of what I'm speaking about. We apparently have a homeless problem. We have a national housing affordability crisis in America today.
100%.
Right. Okay. All right. But there's 120 million single family homes in America. Only 108 million of them are occupied full time. There's less than a million homeless people, for example, right? Okay. The problem that we have is not that we don't have enough housing. The problem is that the housing is hoarded by people who have two, three, four, five houses, and who are busy using those extra houses to make money, right? And everyone is getting priced out. Right. Okay. So this is what I'm talking about. Okay. That's the system that's creating the stress that people are struggling with, right? This solution is that we should not have a system that allows people to take more than they can use. That,
Mm.
that, that allows people that creates billionaires when half the country, half the planet, half the humanity doesn't have enough to even get the education they need to understand how they can contribute, right? We're hoarding it amongst the top 1% of the globe, right? I mean, this is what I'm saying. So all our solutions come out of remembering who we are, remembering that we live and function interdependently, that in any symbiotic relationship, if you realize that you receive a lot in order for you to take the next breath, your natural inclination is to say, I have to receive in order to do anything. The least I could do is give something back. That becomes very natural once you realize that is exactly how you exist. That's exactly how you live. But right now, we're operating under this mythology that we're all these like separate, perfect little circles, and we function independently of each other. And what happens to one doesn't affect another. So therefore, and that's all we think we are, when that is not what we are. When nothing lives that way, right? And so the empowerment comes from from recognizing, one, that they already see that there's a problem. They just want a solution that doesn't require them to get a doctorate degree.
Mm.
Okay. Okay. They don't have time for that. The good news about this solution is that this is reminding them of something they already know, something that they've been convinced that doesn't exist, which is that in order for any of us to prosper. All of us need to prosper. And that the society that allows some to prosper at the expense of all is not sustainable. This is why things are getting worse and worse and worse and worse, is because most of everything is going to fewer and fewer people, and everyone else is being left out. No, we have plenty of resource on this planet for everyone to live in abundance, if only we got back to the basic things we do with people we care about, which is not to hoard, which is to actually share, which is not to let ownership differentiate between who gets to get education or healthcare or even contribute. Right? That's the problem of where we are. And the answer, the good news about the answer is we already know in our heart of hearts. We just have to dismiss these myths, these virtues, and these values, which have convinced us of something that's simply not serving us.
So let me ask you this, and you may not have an answer for this, but I'm curious.
Sure.
I think the thing that I noticed the most about people is they're so detached and disconnected. I want to say from their heart center, for lack of better terms. And so I believe that part of the remembering is somehow summoning a level of compassion that I almost think we as a society have allowed to be lulled to sleep, unless we're being intentional, right? Do you have any thoughts or want to share anything around how do we not only help people remember, but how do we help them reconnect with their compassion or their empathy?
And this is it's really straightforward. We have to be human,
Mm.
and we have to be human with each other. I mean, whether you are at the grocery store in the checkout line, you while that checker is checking out your groceries, that's a human being standing there, and you're standing there, and there's nothing you can do until all the groceries are checked out, right? Okay. If just be showing up in that now moment and seeing that person as a person and giving them your attention in that moment, not in any type of stalker way, just in a normal human way. Hello, how are you doing? And actually listening to what they say, it changes people. Because
Mm.
guess what? The normal way we talk to each other when it's just transactional is to say so little with so much. Oh yeah, the weather is this and this is blah 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 blah, blah, and you might as well not even be talking to each other, right? No, actually show up in the now moment. Give yourself to the moment. What it does is it inspires the person to do the same. This person is actually listening to me. Oh, so I can actually say how I feel, and we can start to have the starting of a conversation. The more you do that, the more you send out that energy. You have to be the human if you want to be treated like a human, right? Right now, we don't treat each other like that. We treat each other like stranger danger. Like this is like everything that is standing in the way of everything I need to take care of me and my family is all these people trying to get it too, right? And that's how we treat them, and that's how they treat us. And so, no, they're not going to wave. They're busy competing. No, we have to reverse that by saying, no, actually, this is a human being. In fact, this human being is the reason why I'm getting my food is because they're able to check out this food, and then someone in the back put it on the shelves, and then someone drove a truck to put it into the warehouse, and on and on and on, and someone grew it.
That part.
Okay, right. All those people are people, and they matter. And if we start recognizing the humanity in each of us, in each one of our reactions, we interact. If we start seeing each other as full people and not as, oh, that's that black guy, or that's that woman, or that's that older person, or any other label that society has put us into, right?
Yep.
That's not humanity. The humanity is the whole holistic picture of this is a person who eats too. This is a person who has children. This is a person who has family. This is a person who's worried about keeping their lights on. Oh, just like me. Okay, right. If we saw that in each other, if we took the time to see that in each other, it will reciprocate. And then slowly but surely, you start creating the kind of authentic relationships that we actually see each other again. But we're with the path that we're on now, because of the narratives that we're told and because of these virtues that rationalize them, is to not to see each other, to reduce each other to some label, some argument, some voting preference, or whatever, none of which is the totality of who that person is, right? So that's how we get back to that. We have to take the time to be human again, and to look to people in the manner by which we would want to be looked at. I mean, none of us are just the totality of the stupidest things we've done. But how many people? That's how we reduce them. That's all we treat them as. Pick a name, any name, famous name, and you'll see we reduce them down to the worst aspects of their actions, their personalities, as if that's all they are. Right.
I appreciate
And yes.
your I feel like the beauty about talking to you is when I ask you questions, your solutions are simple, right?
Yeah.
They're not over complicated where people feel like, oh, I can't do that, or I need, like, to your point, a doctorate degree to understand it. It's like you just have to show up and be human. In every moment, you get to breathe air, right? So we're coming up on time. First of all, I know we'll have another conversation at some point, but there are two questions that we ask everyone, and I think the first one you're going to really enjoy. So the first one is there are people watching this podcast who are struggling at home, right? There are people watching this podcast that are in a position in life where they're really struggling through something, and we have an opportunity and a microphone that we could possibly say something to impact their life. So I'm going to ask you if you could share something with that person who logged on today to watch the podcast and got the gift of Kevin.
Well, I appreciate that question, Ebony. I do. And so, to my friend out there, or my friends out there, let me just let you know that I feel, while I don't know you individually, and therefore I won't begin to presume I know your journey. I just know that the struggle you're feeling now, when I look to the struggles that I have felt, I was at a point where I felt completely hollow. And the reason why I felt completely hollow was because I had built my life based on what I was told, all these virtues, values, and narratives. And it did build a life. It didn't mean anything to me. It had nothing to do with who I am. What empowered me to get from that pit of emptiness to a sense of purpose was I understood that I was empowered to learn what is true about what I'm experiencing. What is true about what I'm experiencing that will help me understand what my purpose here in this life is, that leads to a sense of fulfillment. And that because I was empowered to ask that question and to get that answer, right, right, I I then could co-create a life that meant something genuine, right? This does not require degrees. It simply requires you to be diligent enough to care about the things that care about yourself enough to say, I am not going to make my decisions based on anything that I'm not confident is actually true. Right. If you commit yourself to doing that, you're going to start seeing, one, how much we're lied to, and two, how easy it is to find out what the truth is. And three, once you have the accurate information, how much easier it is to set up your life in a way, no matter how much money you have in the bank, set up in a way that actually serves you, that you can actually look in the mirror and be proud of the person you see. Right. And so that's what I would offer to the person who's struggling right now. You're
Thank you so
empowered.
much.
Yeah.
The second question, which you may also like, but our final question today is, what does it mean to be a kind soul?
Oh, I tell you, you know what it means to be a kind soul. It's not a should. Once you recognize the abundance that you actually receive in order for you to do anything.
Mm.
I mean, we have nutrients in our body that are millions of years old. We have, we breathe air that gives us energy. Okay. So there's so many things that we have to receive in order for us then to say, okay, now I'm empowered to do something. Right. When you realize that you are receiving such an abundance of things, right? Then the most natural thing is that you're if you like being alive, to be grateful. The authentic gratefulness The joyful soul comes from the fact that look at all that I am receiving in order to now go out and co-create what? To do what? To be selfish? No, not when you are receiving all that. None of us earn the air we breathe, right? So if you're given this stuff, generously, it inspires you to be both grateful, and that gratefulness allows you to then go and serve a cause greater than simply yourself, right? Because you want to get the next breath of air. You want to get that next good food. You want to, right. And it becomes a genuinely symbiotic, sustainable relationship. And that's who we are in our natural state. And so that's how I would answer the question. And it comes from an authentic place.
I appreciate that. Kevin, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you today. And I definitely feel like we're just kind of scratching the surface. But I want to just let you know how much I appreciate what you shared. And I hope our listeners really take time to think deeply about today. Thank you so much for joining us at Hello Kind Soul podcast. Folks, remember, don't let anyone take the joy out your joy. And most importantly, continue to raise the vibration of kindness on a global scale. Thanks again, Kevin.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.